And this, uh, Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples. My name is Tony Fisher. I am grateful to serve this congregation as its minister. I welcome you into this space, and I'm very, very sorry that you can't be here in person. It's been a difficult week in trying to balance the news and our sense of community versus safety. But we think we've made the right choice, and we welcome you into this virtual space this morning with all our hearts. I'm grateful this morning to have in the AV room, as usual, Daniel Goodsit, and also this week, Ruben Moya, who will be taking over the services next week for next Sunday as Daniel has some time off. And of course, John Forsyth, who's with us always as our tech chair. I'm grateful to have Bobby Berglund here with us, who will be doing a few pieces of the service as we're inviting our Board of Trustees to take part and be more visible at the front of the sanctuary on Sunday mornings. And Bobby gets to be the guinea pig, the first one to do so. I am especially grateful to have our new co-music directors, Abby and Sean Allison, who have brought with them a fellow musician and guitarist and friend, Dave Dust, who will be joining us this morning. And welcome, Dave. And I'm again grateful to have you all here with us this morning. If you're visiting us somehow for the first time online this week, we hope that you'll make yourself known in the comments section below the video feed on Facebook Live. Tell us who you are and where you are, and you can be sure that you'll receive a warm welcome online. Along with our reopening committee and the Board of Trustees, our religious exploration organizing team is just as disappointed that we can't meet this week. They had created a wonderful and welcoming environment for our children and youth. Some wonderful activities. They were going to join us here in the sanctuary and participate in small ways at the beginning of the service, and we're disappointed that that can't happen. But that will happen, hopefully sooner rather than later. It's sometime in September, as early as the 5th, perhaps, or the 19th, and we will look forward to welcoming everybody in our community back again. So just a brief, hopefully a brief interruption in in-person services, and then we'll begin again. If you are new to us, we hope you'll email our administrator and let her know, Anna Riazzi, that you would be interested in receiving our mailings. You can reach her at office@uunaples.org. That's office@uunaples.org. And that way we can let you know about all the things that are going on in the congregation. For now, however, let's take a deep breath together and center ourselves for our time of worship with this morning's prelude. Awesome. The chalice that we're about to light, this vessel with its broad, open rim, stands ready to accept our diverse perspectives and hold the hopes and dreams that stir within each one of us this morning. The flame we will kindle symbolizes our unity, our understanding that even though we are apart, and must be so, and that our daily paths may differ, we all strive for beloved community here on earth. As this community gathers in spirit, so may our flame leap and dance with the added glow of our many lights and radiate far beyond these sanctuary walls. Let's join together in the chalice lighting response that you'll see on your screen. Each morning, we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and to give back. And let's join together in singing our opening hymn, Gather the Spirit, music by Unitarian Universalist singer-songwriter Jim Scott.
Gather the Spirit, harvest the power. Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit of heart and mind. Seeds for the sowing are laid in stone. Nurtured in love and conscience refined. With body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall. The chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again.
We stand here in Naples on ground occupied by human beings for over 12,000 years, and within known history by the Calusa people, a culture that evolved through significant changes in the Earth's temperature and sea level. We recognize, too, those indigenous peoples who were pushed into southern Florida following the arrivals of Europeans to this continent, the Seminole and the Miccosukee. We honor this ground and their presence among us. We breathe the same air and water that they did, and we are concerned as they are about both. breath, spirit, essence. Creation and recreation most often comes with a cleansing breath, a clearing breath, a healing breath. To breathe is to inspire. Without breath, there is no life. The ancients felt that breath was the foundation of spirit or soul, the essence of our being. We often take a breath to clear the mind. So we are taking a breath this week to help clear the air, to help understand what's going on here in Southwest Florida with the virus. We take the opportunity of the weather this week to even avoid having people on the pavilion, just so that we can take a breath, assess, and then restart. Speaking of indigenous people, there's a wonderful book by Joseph Marshall called The Lakota Way, Stories and Lessons for Living. In that book, Marshall talks about the Lakota tradition of humility as being one that enhanced all the other virtues. To be generous was good, for example, but only as long as one didn't boast about one's generosity. Anything that was done for good, for the sake of showing off, was really not in the best interest of all, because it was lifting one person up. Humility was a virtue that the Lakota prized over all others in their leaders. To possess a quiet and humble persona was being aware of others and other things. An arrogant and boastful leader was only aware of him or herself. Unfortunately, our methods for selecting leaders today seems to favor the arrogant and the boastful. But the Lakota tradition was that humility was the most important virtue in their leaders. Humility provides clarity, where arrogance makes a cloud, is a quote from one Lakota leader. So humbled in the face of things that we cannot control, the weather, a pandemic, we take a breath, we honor our place on the earth, and we think about humility, which is our topic for today. Let's center ourselves for our time of sharing and meditation with our hymn, Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Fuente de amor, ven hacia mí y al corazón cántale tu compasión. Sopla a volar, sube en la mar. Cristo moldear la justicia de la vida. Arraigame, libérame, fuente de amor, ven a mí, ven a mí.
So it's been a troubled week for all of us across the nation. We recognize how many folks are suffering again at another peak in the virus caused by the Delta variant. Our hearts go out to those who are suffering, those who have died, and their families, and those who are on the front lines trying to keep up with something that's very difficult to deal with emotionally and logistically. We take time to think about those in Haiti who are suffering yet another setback, another disaster in the earthquake and the loss of lives and the disquiet in that community, in that nation that seems to be never ending. This morning we have news from Gayla Jackson that she suffered a seizure at the end of July, serious seizure, but I spoke to her yesterday and she was carrying on conversation. Her husband Tom reports that Gayla beat him at cards yesterday morning, so we know that everything is sort of, all the pieces are coming back together for Gayla, but it's going to be a long recovery. We'll send out word of how you can respond and send Gayla your thoughts through our Caring Corner email that goes out every Tuesday. And thus, if you have like to share a joy or a sorrow with the congregation, that is a good way to do it. Send an email either to me at minister@uunaples.org or to the office@uunaples.org. And let us know what you'd like to communicate to the rest of the congregation. Your joys, your sorrows, and all the things in between are always welcome for sharing. In this moment, if you have somebody that you're thinking of, we hope that you'll take the time to speak their name out loud. It could be your own name. It could be that of a loved one or a friend who's going through hard times or experiencing the joy of success. So if you will take the time to speak a name out loud, wherever you are, and here in the sanctuary, I will light a candle of community to honor all those joys and all those sorrows that cannot be spoken here, but continue to impact our lives. As we enter our time of meditation, it's always good to acknowledge that our lives are always in flux, buffeted by things that we can and cannot control. And so it's often better to take time to lean into the motion and find our center and within new ways to live. Let's join together in the spirit of meditation. Spirit of life, God of our deepest understanding, may we always begin from a place of gratitude. When we're happy or when we're broken, may we be grateful for the ability to feel and share deeply. When we reach out to others, may we know our compassion as a grateful response to all the things we've been given. When we seek solitude, let us breathe humbly for the ability to find peace or search our own depths. When we act thoughtlessly or foolishly, May we be grateful for conscience and the power to learn from our mistakes and make amends. When we act with kindness and skill, may we honor those who have been our guides and teachers along the way. And when we share our stories and listen to the stories others have to tell, may we be thankful for the blessings of family and friends and community. Spirit of love, when we begin with gratitude for the wholeness of life and all that we hold dear, there comes a quiet power to meet the needs and the challenges of our day. May it be so for all of us. Let's share some moments of silence.
The reading today is entitled Transcending Boundaries by Yvonne Seyon. Let me tell you something about the author. Before becoming the first African American woman to be ordained as a Unitarian Universalist minister in 1981, Yvonne Seyon served as a university professor and administrator. She founded the Black Studies Center at Wright State University and helped to design one of the first doctoral programs in Black Studies in the United States. You know, when we listen to someone read something to us or when we read something ourselves, To more fully understand their words, we need to try to connect to something in our own lives to make it meaningful. When I read the first paragraph of Yvonne's passage that I'm going to share with you, I pictured my childhood. We didn't have a house that had air conditioning, and we lived in the Midwest where it was hot. So in the evenings, the whole family retreated to the backyard to try to escape the heat of the house, let it cool down a little bit before we went to bed. And we spent our evenings looking up at the firmament, thinking about the constellations, the vastness of space, and not thinking about boundaries. It seemed like there were no boundaries in that backyard with the skies above us. Once in a while, there were northern lights that we could see, sometimes a meteor. We tried identifying constellations, but still, it was a feeling of complete openness. Well, let me read to you what Yvonne has written about transcending boundaries. See if you can picture yourself in some of the situations that she writes about. When I was a child, I would stand and gaze at the starry firmament and contemplate infinity. As I stood there, the boundary of time dissolved. I expanded my spirit to fill the boundaries of that space. My being stilled, and all my fears and anxiety and anguish disappeared. Forgotten were the chores, the homework, for my case, my little brother, and the ordinary around me. Transcending boundaries was fun in those days. But as I reached adulthood, it became more difficult. More and more, the world was with me as I did my chores and my homework. More and more, my own fears were with me as I encountered others. More and more, I was aware of those boundaries of race, class, age, sex. I felt myself cringe at the bandering of the youth on the street corner near me. I felt myself become tearful as I encountered a senior citizen living on a fixed income, or the pain of limited choices of people who were in other situations than I. I felt myself become angry as I was subjected to the indignities of being rejected by others because I'm black, because I'm a woman, or because of the blind person or the gay person that I'm with. I felt myself become unwilling to acknowledge my oneness with the addicted person who's my friend, or the homeless people sleeping on the benches in the park. Today, transcending boundaries is very hard work. For one thing, I've created more of them since I was young, and I've built them higher and stronger than they once were. For another thing, I'm much more self-righteous and much less humble than I was then. Sometimes, when I'm at my best, I remember that the other I distinguish myself from could be me in another time, in another place, in another circumstance. Then I remember the words of a colleague who observed that it's my racism, my sexism, my homophobia that I'm called upon to address. So, I take a few deep breaths and I begin to release the fears that are those boundaries between me and my fellow humans.
Donald Campbell, in his book, Daniel, Decoder of Dreams, shares a wonderful teaching story about humility. Dr. Harry Ironside, who was the pastor of the Moody Church in Chicago in the first part of the last century, also president of the African Inland Mission and a popular Christian speaker of the day, was reported that at one point early in his ministry became quite concerned with his own lack of humility and began to refer to the problem in conversation. As a remedy, somebody facetiously suggested that Harry march through the streets of Chicago wearing a large sandwich board, declaring scripture verses there for all to see and hear. Suggested verse was Matthew 5:51, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Ironside, surprisingly, took the advice and went to the sidewalks. Returning to his study and removing the unwieldy meekness inducer, he was heard to say, "I'll bet there's not another man in town who would do that." I guess we can say that when we lack humility, it's hard to deal with any problem, especially the lack of humility. So our conversation today is about that, and about boundaries, and about fears. I recently read an article by Mickey Kashtan in the magazine Tikkun. Kashtan is a certified trainer in nonviolent communication in the Bay Area, and she writes a very sobering article about confronting the real issues, long-term, that we face on this planet. She suggests that for the last 100 years or so, as significant portions of the population within the so-called liberal democracies have known a comfort and an ease and personal liberties that have been unprecedented, at least since the turn to patriarchy more than 500 years ago, 2,500 years ago. Now, it's not a new phenomenon for some people in a culture to enjoy that kind of ease at the high stratus of society. But as far as the broader approach, or the broader ability to live with a certain amount of ease, has really been unprecedented in the last 100 years or so. This has to do with the unleashing of cheaper energy and the ability to continue to push sources of labor to other populations, from slavery in the South to other people in other places that don't require as much compensation. All this has allowed many of us to live in an incredible way with privileges that other people can only look at and desire, and that people in the past would be amazed at. But it is unsustainable, given the population of this world, given the wants and needs of every person. We are unprepared to share, and unprepared for what must come in the future as we face an environment that is in chaos and social systems that are in disarray. Our options are to choose what kind of human beings we wish to be, who we're going to be thinking about, how we're going to view people who are trying to oppress, to maintain the status quo for their own benefit, how to deal with people who are disagreeing with us, how we're going to view ourselves, how we confront the risks and challenges of an uncertain future. The pandemic has brought up within us many fears of a lack of control. We get angry at those who don't accept the vaccine. But much of that anger, it comes from our own fear of the inability to control. We struggle to how to confront, how to communicate, how to have dialogue across the divides that face us in the world. How to begin to solve the problems when there's so much dissent. If you've listened to me for 7 years, you know that from my perspective, the first option is for us to lean into community, to lean towards relationships that bind us together. We all know that Unitarian Universalism expresses the freedom of conscience, the worth and dignity of every person, a hope for a global culture where everyone enjoys equity and peace and justice. But we're also a privileged group of people who can certainly turn around and walk out the door anytime we wish. But the kind of community, the kind of relationships that I'm talking about require us to dig a little deeper, to be aware that we need one another more than we can possibly know, now and even more so into the future. If we're looking to act in this world, the first thing we must do is seek community. Community of people perhaps we don't completely agree with, but with whom we can develop a sense of trust and understanding and a grounding for us to do greater work. We need to be able to overcome the boundaries that we ourselves have constructed. Bobby talked wonderfully about her backyard growing up. We need to return in our minds to those places to begin to understand the boundaries, the layers that we have in fact constructed around our own hearts and minds, and to begin to open those up. Yvonne Seon talked about looking up at the firmament. Bobby talked about looking up at the stars in her backyard. There's a wonderful story about Teddy Roosevelt, a complex man at the best of times. And a story told about Teddy Roosevelt by his friend William Beebe, who was a naturalist, well-known naturalist in the United States. Beebe related that they would spend long hours in conversation. They were great friends, many times in many places, especially Teddy's house in upper state New York. And after an evening of long conversation, solving the problems of the world, or even the minutest information about the natural world, they would go out onto the lawn and lie on their backs. And without the use of a telescope, they would search the skies and look in the lower left-hand corner of the constellation Pegasus. And then one or the other, and they did this many, many times during their friendship, one or the other would recite, "That is the spiral galaxy in Andromeda. It's as large as our Milky Way. It is one of 100 million galaxies. It is 750,000 light years away. It consists of 100 billion suns, each larger than our own." And they would look at that fuzzy little light in the sky and ponder those incredible things. And that one would look at the other and say, "Now I think we're small enough. Let's get some sleep." For Teddy Roosevelt, seeing that distant galaxy gave him a way to look at himself from a different perspective, as someone who wasn't so big and important when stacked up against the whole universe. Rachel Carson talked about the absolute need to go back to nature to find ourselves, to find the reality of who we are in the world. We, as Unitarian Universalists, speak of the interdependent web of all creation of which we are only a part. Finding that perspective is so important in the work that we have to do. Finding a sense of humility in that, or in gratitude for all that we've been given, however and wherever we do it, finding something that we feel is greater than ourselves, so that we're not focused on ourselves so much, or our opinions, or our perspectives. As important as they are, I'm not suggesting that we accept a humble countenance where humility is seen as a giving up of power. Because I believe that from humility comes power, as the Lakotas did. A wider appreciation of all people, an understanding of all needs. We are so aware that we need one another and yet unable to find common ground. This past Friday night, I joined a number of people in a workshop offered by the Dr. David Campt. David has been here at UCGN a number of times and has provided workshops to help us take the next step in communicating to those people who may not exactly be in the same place we are, especially along the issues of race. This past Friday, we were talking about critical race theory and how we engage that conversation out in the wider world, how we begin to talk about education, especially around this issue, and hoping that we can avert some great disaster where these issues are not taught in our public schools for the fears that have grown up around what we're teaching. There's a fear that we're teaching our children to not appreciate this nation, to not feel good about themselves as white people, but that's clearly not the case. And so David offers a particular model for approaching other people on this subject, people who may not fully agree. He calls it the race method. And you'll have to go to one of his workshops to fully get the message, but the whole point is to, when you are in these conversations, to stop, to take a clarifying breath, and to reflect on how these issues connect to you, how their fears and your experience may meet up. Now, Bobby talked about this wonderfully in her introduction to the reading, how we continue to build the boundaries, and not knowingly, actually, but we build boundaries around our own hearts and minds and don't allow ourselves to get across. We don't admit the kinds of things to others that we ourselves experience, whether we, for instance, cross the street when we see a black person walking down the road. Simple things like that, admitting to those parts of ourselves that we're not particularly happy with, but doing so out loud in conversation with folks who have those same fears, and therefore creating a connection. The RACE method stands for reflect, ask, connect, and expand. So the idea of being vulnerable, of being humble in the face of these larger issues and being able to talk about them openly and honestly, and not from a particular position of pride, of position. We struggle with this all the time. Unitarian Universalists are especially struggle with this a lot, in that we are an intellectual group of people for the most part. highly educated in many, many ways. Not completely. We have a diverse population within our congregations. But the culture is what I'm talking about. What we must do as a culture, as a religious culture, is begin to change. We've got to take that deep breath. We've got to understand the power that we have in our openness and in our expressed humility and our expressed desire for a global community where peace, justice, and love reign. We have to be able to understand the sacrifices that are going to be necessary as we move forward to face all the challenges in this world. Understanding that community is the beginning and that sacrifice will be necessary as we go forward. We say that there is diversity in our congregations, and yet we know that that's not as true as we would wish. And we hold on to our particular ways and likes because they're comfortable. And that comfort is rooted, and we're fearful about losing that sense of comfort. And those are the things we need to, as a community, begin to talk about. How do we journey together in love and begin to release some of the boundaries that each individual of us, one of us, holds, and we as a culture hold, so that we can, in fact, engage the wider world in the critical conversations we need to have to begin to try and heal the divides and solve the problems that face us. For me, this is a spiritual conversation. It's spiritual because there's a need to deepen individually and collectively in that conversation. There's a need to find our center, to find our gratitude, to find our place in the universe through our collective experience, through sharing, through music. The joy of gathering and communicating and being in fellowship. This is the great effort of our day. To act in humility and an awareness of all that's around us from a deep sense of commitment and compassion towards the common good, the good for all. And the first thing we must do is recognize that what we're doing as a culture is not sustainable, and that what we need is to be together to solve the problems. Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the lights of our Unitarian movement, Unitarian Universalist movement, talked about religion very simply. And he wrote that religion is to do right. It is to love. It is to serve. It is to think. It is to be humble. There is a power in humility. Let us lead from there. So may it be.
Hello, my name is Bobby Berglund. I'm honored to serve as the vice president of this congregation. I have some incredible board members to work with. Bill McCormick, our congregation's president, Mike Kirko, the vice president of finance, Chris Cowan, our recording secretary, and trustees Kathy Gorski, Elaine Cocroft, and Jody Bisogno. You're going to be hearing from each of them in upcoming weeks. I am a fourth-generation Unitarian Universalist. My great-grandparents erected a monument on the land that was settled by my ancestors. And on this monument, they inscribed 4 words that they wished for future generations to consider in their lives. The first one on the list is humility. So it's interesting that we're talking about that today. It's been part of my life for a long time, and you still have to work at it. I became a member of this congregation in 2006. One purpose of this church is to encourage all who gather here to grow more generous in spirit and in action. That's the great end of all the world's faith traditions. As we take time to consider Tony's words today and the other messages you've heard, let's also take time to show our gratitude for this community and all that it does. This morning's offering will be gratefully received. Please consider sending a contribution today. The information you need to donate is on the screen.
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the beauty of each hour of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of night. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of ear and eye, for the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human love, brother, sister, parent, child, friends on earth and friends above, for all gentle thoughts and mild. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For each perfect gift of source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
These few moments each week are dedicated to any major announcements or information about upcoming all-congregational events. Everything you need to know about these ongoing activities you can find in the Sunday news, in the weekly news email, or by going online to our website at uunaples.org. As you know, this week has been a challenge. The recent uptick in COVID cases in Florida, we're leading the nation, unfortunately, led us to reconsider our original reopening, scheduled for today. This was to be a great celebration, a welcoming of our children back into the RE programs, and to all of you who have been viewing our services online. We'll continue to monitor the situation, of course. Hopefully, we can come together again in the sanctuary soon, with our families and our children present. The next 2 weeks, barring any other major changes in COVID or in the weather, we would like to welcome you to come in person to the pavilion, where our service is also streamed, if you'd like to be with other members and friends of the congregation. As many of you know, Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal religion. We don't have a creed that you must subscribe to in order to become a member. But each independent congregation often develops a covenant that reminds them of what they promise to each other, how they will be together as a community. For our services on August 22nd and on August 29th, Reverend Tony will be preaching on covenant as we begin a congregational conversation about how we choose to live and work together, with one another in our community. On September 5th, we'll be joined by the Coalition of Immokalee Workers and the Alliance for Fair Food for our Labor Day celebration. And please keep your fingers crossed and mark your calendars that by September 19th, we can come back together for a renewed reopening, for the official reopening and in-gathering service that we would hope would be happening today. But for now, let's sing along with our wonderful musical team as they lead us in our closing hymn, number 208, Every Time I Feel the Spirit.
Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray.
Up on the mountain, my God spoke, for his mouth came fire and smoke. All around me looked so shine. Ask my God if all was mine.
Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. The river Jordan runs right cold, chills the body, not the soul. Ain't but one train on this here track, runs to heaven and right back. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Yes, every time I feel the Spirit
the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray.
Woo! Thank you all. We close with the words from the Buddha. The thought manifests as the word. The word manifests as the deed. The deed develops into habit, and habit hardens into character. So watch the thought and its ways with care, and let it spring from love, born out of concern for all beings. As the shadow follows the body, as we think, so we become. Go in peace, go in love. Have a wonderful day.